He vanished into the Egyptian desert for nearly a century, survived on a raven's bread, and was buried by lions. St. Paul of Thebes, the man who proved the empire can't touch a soul that refuses to bend. St. Paul of Thebes is remembered as one of the earliest and most influential Christian hermits of Egypt. He is commonly called Paul the Hermit, or Paul the First Hermit in later Christian tradition. He is associated with the Thebaid, the desert region around ancient Thebes in Roman Egypt. Traditional accounts place his birth in the early 3rd century, often around AD 230. Traditional accounts place his death in the mid-4th century, often around AD 341. Many Western calendars commemorate him on January 15th, while the Roman Martyrology lists him on January 10th. That calendar difference reflects how commemorations shift, not a dispute about his basic identity. The main Western source for his life is a work attributed to St Jerome, written around AD 374 or 375. Because Jerome wrote decades after Paul's death, later reference works treat many details cautiously. Even so, Paul's veneration is ancient, widespread, and closely tied to the rise of desert asceticism. To understand Paul, you need the context of 3rd century Roman rule and periodic persecution in Egypt. In the traditional story, Paul's parents die while he is young, leaving him property and inheritance. He is often described as educated and capable, not as a primitive wanderer. He is also said to have had a sister, whose marriage placed him inside a wider household network. The narrative claims that a relative sought his wealth and planned to betray him to authorities. Whether every detail is exact or not, the theme is clear, because fear and greed often hunted believers. Paul fled into the desert, first to survive, and then to live a life totally oriented to God. In these accounts, he chooses isolation, not because he hates people, but because he seeks undivided fidelity. The Egyptian desert offered distance from officials, distance from social pressure, and distance from compromise. Over time, his flight becomes a vocation, and his solitude becomes an alternative form of martyrdom. Jerome describes Paul living in a cave-like shelter with a spring for water and a palm for support. The palm is said to provide fruit for food and leaves for clothing over long years. This is presented as severe stability because a hermit is defined by perseverance, not by adventure. The story emphasizes that Paul's real work is prayer, fasting, and disciplined attention to God. A famous motif says a raven brought him bread in the wilderness, often described as a daily portion. That motif links Paul to biblical wilderness themes, especially the idea of providence without comfort. Paul's most important miracle is not spectacle, but the endurance of a consistent, holy life. The most famous encounter in the story is his meeting with Saint Anthony the Great. Anthony represents the wider desert movement, while Paul represents a more radical, hidden solitude. In Jerome's narrative, Anthony is guided through the desert to find Paul near the end of his life. The meeting functions like recognition, as the famous monk honors the unknown elder. A key scene says the raven's bread portion doubles when the two are together. That detail symbolizes communion, hospitality, and divine confirmation of their meeting. The story also introduces a cloak associated with Saint Athanasius of Alexandria, a major 4th century bishop. Paul is said to ask Anthony to bring the cloak so that he can be buried with it. Anthony leaves and returns to find Paul already dead, often described as kneeling in prayer. That posture presents Paul's death as continuous with his life of worship and vigilance. Then comes another famous element that shaped later iconography of Paul the Hermit. 2 lions appear in the narrative and are said to help dig a grave for Paul. Whether read literally or symbolically, The point is that creation honors a life fully given to God. Anthony buries Paul, and the story ends without crowds, without politics, and without public celebration. This kind of ending matters because the desert tradition values hidden holiness over visible achievement. Responsible Catholic references note that the raven and lions belong to the familiar legendary elements of the life. At the same time, Paul's long-standing cult shows he was not simply invented by a single writer. His historical significance is that he stands near the dawn of Christian monastic consciousness. His spiritual significance is that he proves the Christian life can be pursued with total seriousness. As persecutions faded, the Church needed new forms of heroic witness beyond public martyrdom. The hermit became one such witness, and Paul became a prototype of that uncompromising path. Paul's symbols in art preserve his narrative in a single glance and teach it without words. The palm signifies austerity and self-sufficiency under God, rather than dependence on society. The raven signifies providence and the belief that God sustains the faithful in extremity. The lions signify burial, humility, and the idea that holiness is recognized even in the wilderness. Paul's legacy also continued through later devotion, pilgrimage, and monastic memory in Egypt. One major site is the monastery of St. Paul the Anchorite in Egypt, traditionally linked to his place. Even when buildings change over centuries, a sacred geography can preserve a sacred memory. Paul's name also traveled far beyond Egypt and entered the broader Western liturgical tradition. Because he belongs to the early church, his recognition comes through ancient veneration rather than modern legal procedure. In some sources, you may see later attributions of formal recognition, but the core point is his early cult. Paul is not Paul the Apostle, and he is not a secondary figure from the New Testament. He is Paul of Thebes, the desert hermit whose story sits beside the rise of Christian monasticism. His life challenges every age that tries to make comfort the highest good. His life also challenges every believer who thinks faith can survive without discipline. Paul's witness says that the empire cannot rule a man who refuses to be formed by its appetites. It says that silence can be stronger than propaganda when it is filled with prayer. It says that holiness can be hidden and still reshape the future through the people it inspires. January 15th is therefore a commemoration of radical obedience rather than a soft, inspirational tale. Paul the Hermit remains a sign that Christian civilization is built first in the soul, then in history.